The Second World War had ended, but peace was fleeting. The guns fell silent, but the scars of conflict ran deep across the continent. Cities lay in ruins, families were displaced, and the old world order had been shattered. In the ashes of war, a new and uncertain era was about to begin. Europe was devastated, and a new conflict was brewing, not of armies but of ideologies. The devastation was not just physical but psychological. Millions struggled to rebuild their lives, while governments scrambled to restore order and hope. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers, each convinced their system was the path forward. The world watched as these two giants, once allies against fascism, now eyed each other with suspicion and ambition. The US promoted democracy and capitalism. It saw itself as the defender of freedom, eager to spread prosperity and individual rights across the globe. The Soviets, communism, and state control. The USSR, meanwhile, believed only a strong, centralized government could prevent the chaos and inequality that had led to war. Mistrust quickly replaced wartime alliance. Diplomatic meetings grew tense and every gesture was scrutinized for hidden motives. Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech captured the stark division of Europe. His words echoed around the world, warning of a continent split between freedom and oppression. Eastern nations fell under Soviet control, becoming satellite states. Barbed wire, armed guards, and propaganda marked the new boundaries of influence. Western Europe, aided by the US, rebuilt with democracy and open markets. The Marshall Plan poured billions into recovery, fueling hope and economic revival. The continent became the main stage for Cold War rivalry. Berlin, divided and tense, symbolized the struggle between East and West. Stalin's paranoia and the West's alarm fueled a cycle of suspicion. Each side believed the other was plotting domination, and every move was met with counter-moves. Promises made at Yalta were broken, deepening the divide. Agreements on free elections and cooperation quickly unraveled, replaced by accusations and broken trust. Each side saw the other's moves as threats, escalating tensions. The press fanned fears of espionage, subversion, and nuclear war. The Cold War had begun, a battle of influence, fear, and global stakes. The world would never be the same as two superpowers vied for hearts, minds, and the future of humanity. As tensions rose in the aftermath of World War II, the world found itself at a crossroads. The uneasy alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union quickly unraveled, replaced by suspicion and ideological rivalry. The globe was on the brink of a new kind of conflict, one not fought on traditional battlefields but in the hearts and minds of nations. The US took a decisive stand, determined to shape the post-war order and prevent the spread of communism. In 1947, President Truman announced the Truman Doctrine, pledging unwavering support to nations resisting communist pressure. Greece and Turkey became the first battlegrounds in this ideological struggle, as the US funneled aid and resources to help them withstand Soviet influence. This bold move marked the end of American isolationism. The United States was no longer content to watch from the sidelines. It was now committed to a policy of global containment, actively working to limit Soviet expansion wherever it appeared. The goal was clear: stop communism from spreading further, not necessarily to roll it back where it already existed. This strategy would shape US foreign policy for decades. The world soon split into two opposing camps, each led by a superpower. For many countries, neutrality was no longer an option. They were forced to choose sides in a rapidly polarizing world. Economic recovery became a powerful weapon in this struggle. The US recognized that prosperity could be just as effective as military might in winning allies and containing communism. Through the Marshall Plan, billions of dollars flowed into Western Europe, rebuilding shattered economies, restoring hope, and forging strong, stable democracies that would stand with the West. Stalin, wary of American intentions, rejected this aid for Eastern Europe. He feared that economic dependence would undermine Soviet control and open the door to Western influence. The divide between East and West hardened. While Western Europe prospered and rebuilt, Eastern Europe stagnated under Soviet rule, symbolized by the growing barriers like the Berlin Wall. Europe's fate was sealed, two worlds separated not just by ideology, but by concrete, barbed wire, and armed guards. The Iron Curtain had descended. The US and Soviet Union now competed for influence everywhere, on every continent, in every international organization, and in the hearts of millions. Proxy conflicts erupted across the globe, from Korea to Vietnam, while new military alliances like NATO and the Warsaw Pact drew the lines even sharper. The front lines of the Cold War were drawn, lines that would define international relations, shape societies, and cast a long shadow over the decades to come. Berlin, deep in Soviet-controlled East Germany, was split among the Allies. West Berlin became a symbol of freedom surrounded by communism. In 1948, Stalin blockaded the city, hoping to force the West out. The US and Britain responded with the Berlin airlift, flying in supplies day and night. The world watched as planes landed every minute, defying Soviet pressure. After nearly a year, Stalin lifted the blockade. His gamble failed. The crisis cemented Germany's division into East and West. Berlin remained a flashpoint, a microcosm of the Cold War. The airlift showed Western resolve and ingenuity. The city's fate foreshadowed the long struggle ahead. The Cold War turned deadly in Korea. After World War II, Korea was split, communists in the north, US-backed government in the south. In 1950, North Korea invaded, sparking a brutal war. The US under the UN intervened, pushing the North back until China entered, driving the conflict to stalemate. The war ended in 1953, Korea still divided. Millions died, and the world saw the dangers of superpower confrontation. The Korean War set the pattern for proxy wars to come. The cost was immense, the outcome uncertain. The Cold War's shadow grew darker. In October 1962, the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war. The Soviet Union secretly placed missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US-American spy planes discovered the threat, sparking a tense standoff. President Kennedy weighed military action but chose a naval blockade instead. For 13 days, the world held its breath as Soviet ships approached. Behind the scenes, frantic negotiations unfolded. Khrushchev agreed to withdraw the missiles. Kennedy secretly promised not to invade Cuba and to remove US missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended, but the lesson was clear. Nuclear brinkmanship could destroy us all. The Cuban Missile Crisis changed how the superpowers managed their rivalry. Communication improved, but the threat of annihilation lingered. The world had survived its closest brush with nuclear disaster. Vietnam became America's most divisive Cold War conflict, a battleground not just of armies but of ideas and values. The war would come to symbolize the deep rifts within American society and the global struggle between communism and democracy. After decades under French colonial rule, Vietnam was left fractured. The country split in two, the communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh, and the US-backed South, under Ngo Dinh Diem. This division set the stage for a conflict that would draw in superpowers and ignite passions worldwide. American leaders feared the domino effect, that if South Vietnam fell to communism, the rest of Southeast Asia would soon follow. This belief drove US policy, fueling a sense of urgency and justifying deeper involvement. What began as a mission of military advisors soon escalated. By the late 1960s, hundreds of thousands of American troops were fighting in Vietnam, facing a determined enemy in unfamiliar terrain. Guerrilla tactics, dense jungles, and an elusive Viet Cong made every victory fleeting. The enemy blended with civilians, turning villages into battlegrounds and making progress nearly impossible to measure. For the first time, the horrors of war were broadcast directly into American living rooms. Graphic images and nightly news reports fueled a growing anti-war movement, sparking protests that swept across the nation. As casualties mounted and official statements clashed with reality, public trust in the government eroded. The credibility gap widened, leaving Americans questioning their leaders and the purpose of the war. In 1973, the United States began its withdrawal, leaving South Vietnam to fend for itself. By 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, unifying the country under communist rule and marking a dramatic end to the conflict. The war left deep scars, millions dead or displaced, landscapes ravaged, and families torn apart. Both America and Southeast Asia would struggle with the aftermath for decades. Vietnam exposed the limits of American power and the dangers of ideological conflict. It forced a nation to reconsider its role in the world and the true cost of Cold War ambitions. The conflict haunted a generation, shaping American culture, politics, and foreign policy for years to come. Around the world, the Vietnam War became a symbol of superpower overreach and the tragic consequences of ideological rivalry. The Cold War's human toll was undeniable, leaving a legacy of loss, reflection, and lessons for future generations. The Cold War rivalry soared into space. The Soviets shocked the world with Sputnik in 1957, launching the first satellite. The US raced to catch up, creating NASA and investing in science. Yuri Gagarin became the first human in orbit. America set its sights on the moon. President Kennedy's bold goal: land a man on the moon before 1970. The Apollo program pushed technology and courage to new heights. In 1969, Neil Armstrong's one small step marked a US triumph. The space race was a battle for prestige and proof of national strength. It left a legacy of innovation and exploration. Even in competition, humanity reached new frontiers. By the 1980s, the Cold War entered its final act. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan reignited tensions. President Reagan ramped up military spending and called the USSR an evil empire. The arms race strained the Soviet economy to the breaking point. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev rose to power, bringing reform. His policies of glasnost and perestroika aimed to open society and revive the economy. Gorbachev's changes unleashed forces he couldn't control. Reagan and Gorbachev built an unlikely partnership, signing the INF Treaty in 1987. Reagan's famous challenge, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," captured the moment. The stage was set for dramatic change. The Cold War's end was now in sight. The world braced for transformation. Gorbachev's reforms electrified Eastern Europe. The Soviet grip loosened, pro-democracy movements surged. In 1989, Poland and Hungary broke free, and the Berlin Wall fell as crowds celebrated. The Iron Curtain crumbled almost overnight. The Soviet Union itself unraveled as republics declared independence. A failed coup in 1991 sealed the USSR's fate. On Christmas Day, Gorbachev resigned. The Soviet flag was lowered for the last time. The Cold War ended not with war, but with collapse. The US stood as the world's sole superpower. A new era began, uncertain, uncharted, and forever shaped by the Cold War's legacy. The world order had changed. The story of the Cold War was over, but its impact endures.